everyone, I'm Lily and this is
Tony.
Today we're going to show you how to make this cute little wood chain for practically free. We used our recycled wood that we had, and I used our miter saw, orbital jigsaw, and what's that little thing called? The grinder. You guys could totally get away with not using the grinder if you don't have one. You can hand sand it if you want, but I wanted a rough look around the edges, so we used the grinder. Yeah.
And that's it.
Okay.
Let's get started.
Okay, so here's a list of all the supplies and tools we used. Our total cost for this project was around $20. We actually had all of our tools on hand, so we just had to buy a little bit of the supplies. I know that it could get kind of pricey if you're buying tools for this, and honestly, if I had to pick just the minimal amount of tools for this, I could get the project done with the drill, the orbital saw, and a clamp. It would just take a lot longer to sand if you had to sand by hand. Tony actually gets a lot of our tools on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. If you're on a budget, that would be a great place to check out. And here is our recycled pile of wood that Tony collects for all of our projects. I decided to use a 2x6 since I wanted to make my links pretty big. I first started off by folding an 8x10 piece of paper in half and then in half again. I then drafted a quick rough shape for the link and cut it out. Once you unfold it, you should have the perfect link shape. I took the stencil and traced it onto the 2x6, making sure there isn't any knots in the area that I will be working with. I then used my miter saw to cut the 2x6 to size, and I had to cut a tiny bit off the width of the wood since the link was a bit slimmer than the 2x6. Next, I cut off all the corners, and here's how it looked at this point. I actually thought it would be easier to just sand the edges later on since I was using the grinder and it's pretty rough. But when Tony was making the link, he actually cut the edges more rounded with the miter saw to start off with, and I feel like this was so much faster and easier than having to sand them even with the grinder. Next, Tony clamped the link to the table, and we used the Craig jig drill bit to make 4 holes all along the inner corners of the link. We tried to keep them as close to the sketched line as possible, but not go over the line as well. This drill bit that comes from the Craig jig was actually a bit too big, and it kind of tears up the wood on the back side. I actually didn't mind this because I feel like it gave the wood links character at the end once you kind of stain the wood. But if you don't want it to tear up your wood, I would definitely recommend pre-drilling it with a smaller drill bit. Next, Tony stuck the orbital saw through one of the pre-drilled holes and started to cut the inner shape, pretty much connecting the dots. Apparently, we learned that this could only be done on a very solid surface. Our little table had wheels and the orbital saw kept kicking back too much, so we moved into his shop and clamped this link to his metal frame. I found that the easiest way to cut was by rotating and reclamping the link every time I would finish a cut. While cutting, I always made sure that I was pushing away from myself. This helped put the right amount of pressure on to the orbital saw and gave me cleaner cuts. And that's it. Once you're done connecting all the dots, the center should pop right off. The next step was sanding. I actually used a combination of these cone-tipped sanding bits and the flat sanding discs to sand the inner and outer edges. The grinder could actually get pretty rough, so I wore my safety glasses and gloves for protection. I first sanded all the outer edges and then used the cone bits to kind of sand the inner edges. Okay, once I was done sanding, I marked each link at the top on both sides and bottom on both sides with matching letters to help remember which cuts belong together, so I don't accidentally switch them later once I need to glue them back together. I then used my miter saw to cut the links open. Woohoo, almost done. So I actually accidentally cut all 3 links open, even though I only needed to cut 2 open to connect them. But it's okay, at least they match this way. To connect the links, I added a dab of wood glue onto both sides of the cuts and smoothed it out. I then connected the link to the first one and secured some rubber bands onto each link while the glue dried. I added the last link the same way and let the links dry for about 2 hours before applying some wood stain. For my wood stain, I used some of this Minwax Golden Oak that I mixed with some of the honey colored stain from Varthane. After staining it, I decided to just leave it as is. I did not add any sealer, but if I were to add anything, I think I would just add a matte finish. Here's how it looks in the living room. I love how effortless it looks. The seams actually turned out way better than I was expecting. Honestly, not very noticeable at all because the cut lines go with the wood grain, so it kind of camouflages into the design. The grinder definitely gave the wood like a very rustic texture, which I think is stunning, and I was actually kind of going for that. I did try sanding it smoother in the beginning with my dual sander, and it actually didn't look as cute, so I roughed it back up with the grinder.
Wait, I'll fix my hair real quick, that way it's not messed up.
You're worried about your hair, you're not wearing any pants.
They don't know that.
Well, that's it for this video. We'll see you guys all next time. We're working on some stuff.
Some more stuff. So subscribe so you could see more of our fails and sometimes wins.
Okay, bye.
Bye.